Good morning, everybody from Chelsea, New York, which is not far from 42nd and First, where all of the world leaders, some appointed, some not, are in a single room talking at each other. And we thought that while there's a lot of words and important declarations floating around the city, that we would try to do something a little bit different here on the land of And, a space that has the objective of holding complicated conversations that are centered around curiosity, compassion, concern for each other, trying to navigate through some of the complexities of the world today. The Land of And is a space where everyone can come in with their vulnerabilities and their fears. And I know, alongside all of my so incredibly exciting guests and voices today, that we are very concerned about the future, but we're also hopeful. We want to see if there's an opportunity to surface the most out of the box ideas for what a new world order that some of us here who are both viewing and participating in this conversation, frankly, might not even get a chance to see. But we are in this for everybody but ourselves, frankly. I'm going to hand it over to my compatriot in this effort, which is Saji Prelis from Search for Common Ground. I like to think of him as a global architect who just has an incredibly deep Rolodex. And I had the pleasure of attending an in real life event that he hosted yesterday, and I met all of his friends. And his friends had one thing in common, which is when Saji says jump, we all respond with how high. And so Saji is blessed with a magnetism that draws people, like-minded people together, and was willing to curate a conversation like this, where we're asking ourselves and each other the hardest questions of our time. What could a new world order look like? What are the craziest ideas that are out there? The objective is that we like to throw, and I can't come up with a better analogy, spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. We're certainly in a moment in time now where it feels like everything is crashing down, which both keeps me awake at night and also gives me hope that we have a clean slate to work with, or something along those lines. So with that, I will turn it over to Saji to tell us who these miracle workers are alongside us virtually.
Thank you, Jenna, for hosting us, and thanks to everyone for joining us live in this event, and everyone who will watch and listen to this after this is done as well. But we are really blessed, as you said, Jenna, to be in the company of some amazing heroes and sheroes that I really admire and look up to, and I turn to when I'm in a conundrum, trying to unpack some dilemmas myself. So four of them are here joining us live. Isaiah, who is the Palestinian American amazing leader who is leading one of the largest youth movements in the US around advocacy and policy shaping around peace and security and the role young people playing it. The American Youth Association, but also involved with several startups, which we can talk about when you want. The other is Lika, who has been a pioneer in thinking about non-formal education spaces, informal education, and really think of the role young women play in those spaces. Desperate places like Afghanistan, when they shut down the space for girls to learn, she completely innovated and said, how can we create spaces and bring partnerships with universities to create space opportunities for young girls to learn when there are barriers to learn. She wasn't looking at a problem, she looked at the solution to those problems. I see Kasish from Burundi joining us, who is involved at the front lines of gender-based violence and young women's role in this process, pioneering efforts in her community and her country, and really building trust with men as allies in this work at a community level. Amazing work that she's doing. And Christine from Kenya, who wears many different hats, works representing a government agency, representing a youth-led organization, but the largest youth-led movement in the country, over 250 youth-led organizations coming together to say, while the young people are protesting on the streets, we still need to build trust with a government we don't trust. And how do we do that collectively and not individually? And one thing that every one of these amazing, brilliant speakers shares is that they're not talking about themselves. They're talking about us and not me. and this collective wisdom, collective advocacy, collective collaborative work to feel like we are all achieving something collectively. The collective impact approach is something that they all embody. And that's the kind of role models I look up to. I think that's the type of role model that many young people need to look up to as they grow in a world where everyone is an individual and we live in an interconnected world. So I think the people who are on this screen are living, breathing that truth. So I'm really grateful to Jenna for creating this platform, for listening to them, hearing their voices, hearing their ideas to see actually what can work, whether it's at a community level, continental level, like in Africa, or globally as well. So thank you for hosting us. And I'll turn it back to you, Jenna.
Thank you so much, Saji. And I do want to emphasize that the reason that we are doing this in such a public space is because if we are so committed to doing differently, so many of the conversations like this are happening in very closed door spaces. On all of the social media platforms, obviously our algorithm caters to our interests and our curiosity and our biases. But one thing that I haven't seen is a concentrated effort amongst those who have ideas, and I use ideas broadly. There's not a lot of public forums where folks can participate and engage. So if we think about the founding of the League of Nations that ultimately led to the UN, or the IMF from Bretton Woods, those were all closed door conversations. And even in the infancy of having these conversations, we are committed to doing it in a very, very public forum because we don't know what we don't know. But what we know is that our ideas are only going to flourish if they are built on by people who have traditionally not had access to ideas, conversations like this, or the idea to begin with. So with that, Christine, since you are in the latest time zone and might have to roll off earliest, I would love to start with you. And I'm going to ask you the biggest question of all, which is, in the existing system that you have been trying to navigate, both in lifting up youth voices, centering gender disparity, if you could dismantle one of the systems that we've inherited that could unlock most of the human potential that you see, what system would that be and what would you replace it with? It's also okay if you want to come back to us in 50 years, but where are you on this exact day with that question?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And it's great to be here. And with a bias of Africa, because I come from Africa and that is the context that I understand best, we have been accustomed to systems where youth are seen as beneficiaries and not really people who offer ideas and solutions. And you can clearly see this is a deliberate effort from even the global north, because with the starting of the war on terror, for instance, it was set under the pretext that youth who are a lot in numbers and are unemployed are a security risk to the US, for instance, and hence radicalization and the war on terror. When it comes to local structures, like within the national frameworks, you realize that young people are still seen as people who are told, because culturally, when men are seated, when elders are seated, then you as a young person really don't get to share your opinion. You're only there to be seen and heard. And so, with progressively, with the changes that are happening, with the conversations and policies from the international space, we are seeing a lot of young people now showing evidence that they are the first responders. And COVID-19 was a remarkable era where we really saw how young people came out in numbers, showing the energy and the zeal they have in taking care of the population. And that just went a long way in showing that young people are agents of peace. And that contradicts the previous notion where youth was seen as agents and perpetrators of violence. And so we are seeing somewhat a system shift where youth from Nepal to Pakistan to Nairobi are now coming out. And I'm loving that we're calling it the Gen Z movement, because it's a ripple effect. I mean, the youth in Nigeria, in Nepal, in Pakistan, in France are just coming up to say it's our time. And this is a time to show that we come with skills, we are educated, we know best the future that we want to see tomorrow. And so when it comes to our conversations around system, it is not a conversation around do we have data to show evidence that 3 million Gen Zs were on the streets agitating for their rights and taking responsibility. We saw in Nepal that after the young people were on the streets, they went back and they started cleaning the streets of Nepal to just show solidarity and to show that all the efforts are to build Nepal, are to build the country and not individual interests. And so we are collectively seeing a socialism that is impactful, and people really coming together to say, this transcends our generation, it transcends our individual interests, it transcends our one nation. This is a global agenda. And so all of us need to plug in, and we need to be part and parcel of all the efforts that are coming across the globe.
Christine, I am so overwhelmingly excited about what we saw in Nepal. And as an American activist, it has not gotten a lot of attention here, just because I don't know if you've been paying attention, but things are imploding over here. And so there's been some other headlines that have been occupying our algorithms, but it has been really, everyone is a little bit confused, frankly, about what the Nepalese youth have been able to do, and the speed in which they were able to do it, and then the speed in which they were able to appoint another leader, let alone a female leader. Everyone's a little bit like, wait, what did they do? And so I think I'm hoping that in the next week and a half, we get a little bit of a breather of some airways to be able to actually shine a magnifying glass on what happened. A lot of people, I think, here in the States are going to be like, oh, we could never do that here. Oh, we could never do that here. And Lika, I want to go to you because I'm actually ignorant. I don't know who is in a further east from here time zone, if it's you in Georgia or Nairobi. So I'm so sorry. I could have been wrong. You could be the one that has to go to sleep soonest. But my background is in building education systems in post-conflict and emerging conflict regions. And when I heard what Christine just said about the elder generations or the systems not believing that the youth actually know, and know being subjective and gray. And so I don't need to get into what does that actually mean. But as somebody who's done peace building in her own country and very much through school systems, what is it that traditional metric-based school systems have taught ourselves as we get older that say young people don't know, or we can't trust them, they are just the security threat? I have my daydream moments of gutting the education system entirely, because it's not serving us. It's not delivering the kind of human beings we need for the world. But as someone who spent time developing content for schools, is there a lever that we could potentially pull on that front that might help us believe as we age that younger people might know?
Hi, Jenna, and thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you all and see you all, and Saji. So nice to see you on the screen. So Jenna, I have done work in peace building, and specifically Jewish Muslim peace building. I'm a Jew myself, and obviously it's a background that comes with a lot of interesting exposure to a lot of different problems and issues. So I've done a lot of conversation on that front. And peace building work. The education program that I've been building was in Afghanistan, actually. And it's a very interesting example that is a good example answer to some of the questions that you shared with us that we will be discussing today. Sorry about the background noise.
We're totally fine.
About new systems, about new approaches, about trying new approaches and programs that can work to solve some of the world's biggest issues. Now, why Afghanistan? Because I had an amazing experience being Georgia's youth delegate to the United Nations, and I can spend hours talking about the program and how important it is and how much I believe in it. The exposure that it brings to young people to network and connect with each other is immense, and I'm very lucky to have friends and fellow activists in different parts of the world. When the Taliban took over Afghanistan, my colleague, a former youth delegate of Afghanistan to the United Nations, and myself realized that we have to step up and we have to do something about the issue, because at that time, and frankly even now, the UN and international organizations did not do their job really well to make sure that Afghan women are have access to education and are taken care of. And because of that amazing experience, being a UN youth delegate and being connected with young women around the world, my colleague Aisha Khorram and myself designed a way to provide education access to Afghan women through technology. And that's a big part of what I do right now. I'm a big believer in technology. I'm a big believer in AI. I'm a big believer that this is what we need to use to transform societies and make societies better. And frankly, I can spend hours talking about this. But the experience that I've had is technologies are definitely borderless, and we can access remote and crisis zones through technology. And so far, it's been 3 years that we've been delivering this program in Afghanistan. It's been successful. We do need more involvement. We do need to talk about this more on platforms like this. Unfortunately, the issue is sidelined by other conflicts, and I understand that where that's coming from. There are too many things to talk about in this world, but I do believe that with technology and with borderless societies that I frankly believe in, we can solve these issues and provide access to education to women in the most remote areas. That's what I've been focusing on right now.
Do you mind just giving us like a quick example of what kind of education you are still able to provide those in Afghanistan, just so I have a clear
Absolutely.
understanding of what the program is?
Absolutely. So we work with university students specifically. So young women that attended universities in Kabul and Kandahar. Those are the two provinces where we operated so far. And these young women enrolled in universities and had to stop their education because of the new regime in the country. So what we try to provide different kind of courses to them. We partner with universities around the world, US universities, European universities, and we enroll them into their courses. We also enroll them into different online education opportunities, so like Coursera courses, so we can negotiate the scholarships for these girls so that they're free of charge. Different kind of tech courses, because that's where the employment is these days. Even if they can't find employment online in their country, they can find employment online. So it's different kinds of educational paths that they're interested in to continue. We do also provide tech assets, because that's a very big part of being able to complete this education. Most of the courses are fully accredited. They're master's or bachelor degrees,
Wow.
but we also have boot camps or online courses, short courses, certificate courses, all kinds of. We also partner with tech companies that provide apps like Coursera, like Duolingo, like.
It's okay. There was the tech moment.
So while we are waiting, Jenna, for her, if I can jump in, I mean,
Please.
she's negotiating university to university the ability to allow their course to be taken by outsiders, right? So you can imagine in a closed environment like a university where there are profit model doesn't connect to this social service model,
Right.
he's able to negotiate a new way of thinking about learning, where the ethos of learning and was in its original form to share freely. So she's trying to create those opportunities and provide them for people who don't have those access. So that you can think about how complicated that is. One university to the other, she's negotiating these things and creating arrangements for classes to be taken outside of an educational setting within the US only.
And then Lika, Saji is your intern and just finished your what it was that you were saying so perfectly. I have one other additional, or I have many other additional clarifying questions, and I can't tell if her Wi-Fi is going to be able to hold or not. But Saji, so how many women in Afghanistan are taking her courses? Does the Taliban know that they're doing it? Like, what kind of risk is there?
And there's always a risk to these kinds of opportunities, right? So especially when it's not allowed to go to school or learn. But they're not talking just formal education courses. It's about how to run businesses, how to do a lot of these activities is what they're also learning. So it's one is academic, the other one is practice-oriented work opportunities. So our language learning abilities. So this way they're equipped with eventually to teach even their children
Right.
what kind of values they want. So in some sense, if you think about education as lost as a starting point, then you close the loop for thinking about all the ways that young women learn that teach other young men, other young boys, the values that Afghanistan needs today and for tomorrow, right? So it's this approach. So I don't know exactly how many girls she's young women are she's creating opportunities for, but it is not easy to do. But it's also not going against the rules in the country. It's to make sure the young men growing up have the right values to be successful. Young women growing up have the right opportunity to success and contribute to the country that is actually needs assistance, financial assistance.
Right. Gosh, my wheels are spinning so intensely because if I go back to what Christine was saying about how so many people around the world have so much to learn from the Nepalese, and like even here in the States when we were talking about the youth movements, my favorite part of the French movements is when the farmers come and dump the manure on the doorsteps of the ministries and the elected officials, and like something as basic as that would be pretty profound here in the States. Like the idea that the exchange of best practices. And when you're talking about a platform like this, like Twitch, I'm incentivized to say, let's just have all of the people come on here and talk about their expertise and their best practices. We don't need aid to do it. We just need strong Wi-Fi, recognizing that that's not always a guarantee, recognizing that there's always risk there. But piece, I would love to come to you specifically as somebody with the doctor in the conversation, particularly looking at gender-based violence. And one of the challenges that we have in the United States is gender-based violence or family violence is on the rise. We're intentionally shifting it from family violence to not just gender violence because it takes so many forms of financial violence and violence against children and things like that. And to Saji's point about using platforms like the one that Lika has created to serve both men and women in different countries of conflict. But in a recent conversation I was having with somebody in Afghanistan about how to train more midwives in the country and their stress about being able to do that. And it struck me that like spaces like this through the World Wide Web, and it also is, a foreign policy move if countries in some way, shape, or form, one could argue you can move more Starlinks over different zip codes and area codes to pull this off if needed. But is there any way that you're able to do some of your training in a virtual capacity to scale your knowings and your best practices even more? Is that something that you think that might work?
Yeah, that are very good and interesting questions. And I think I was having this kind of conversation with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about like how the AI is taking power and think the United Nations Unicorn yesterday, and I asked this question to an expert, and my question was if he really thinks that AI is like a sustainable solution for global South countries, and he says yes and no, and that made me reflect a lot. So coming to your question, it is possible, but still, most people, like if I take an example of my country, Burundi, where I come from, they don't have like smartphones, right? They don't have smartphone, they don't have access to smartphones. So we need to contextualize this when we talk about having like virtual trainings and how people should benefit this. We need really to put it in a context where who are supposed to be our beneficiaries, who is supposed to benefit about this. So I'm in the medical field, I'm also a social activist, but I'm also in the medical field, and I know how this is important. The world is going virtual all over, but my country is still very far from that, and I think also most of the countries in the global south. But it's an option that we need to look into it. I don't think it's a good way to do things currently now. Yeah, we do a lot of online training, of course. It's possible, but it's only possible with people who have access to their phones and also have access to the internet, because I think this is two completely different things. You can have a phone and don't have internet. So I think we need to put things in a context. Today, when we talk about young people, it's easy to reach them. I've been thinking about like organizing like online training for my nonprofit back home. We were having a project, and the idea was to do some online training, and I think we end up leaving the idea aside and just flying people to Burundi, which is very costly. So I think it's a good possibility, and it's also a cheap one, but it's a hard one, especially for people who are underdeveloped, because it requires a lot. It requires sometimes taking people from the villages and bring them in town so that they can have access to a full internet. I've been in so much meetings where people end up leaving, or we end up reschedule the meetings because people don't have access to the internet. So if we want to go that way, it's a possible solution for me, but we need to look into context on how to make it more effective.
And by effective, and again, I am no internet specialist, but I have twisted the arms of folks to move satellites into different parts of the satellite sphere, whatever the technical term is. But is it always the strength of the internet?
Yes and no. In a way that, like, for example, we have some possibilities in my country, but it's very expensive. So the question is, who can afford it? And then again, what if the people who can't afford it are the ones who need those training?
Yeah,
so this is like a very important question. We have to look on it. We are like a country that is developing, and I think also all over people, they are going into virtual things. But again, we need to think about who are the people who are supposed to benefit of this training we want to do, of all these possibilities we want to bring, and think about them, be in their shoes. Because I think, people don't look how like this AI is also bringing a lot of inequalities worldwide. There's a lot of inequalities going on there, and I think we need to address inequalities, because I believe like it's so hard to talk about people who are not there. There is this saying I like a lot, you can't plan about me if I'm not in the house. So it's very important to think about who are the beneficiaries, and can the beneficiaries access to it? Can they afford it? And can they like be able to use those technologies? Yeah.
Thank you for jumping in and answering that question with such clarity. I do want to come back to your specialty specifically around health education and gender systems in Burundi. And I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Christine, which was if there's any, because we all know that there's gender-based challenges and there's technological-based challenges and there's the stories of the past that we still have to somehow navigate. There's capitalism, the haves and that. Like it feels so daunting, yet we're all still here being like, well, what else could we come up with? So are there any additional very like concrete systems? Because in my head, as you're talking, I'm like, okay, I actually think there's a way that I could go access more Wi-Fi strength. Like I could go to funders who specifically funders that used to underwrite efforts in Afghanistan. And in America, it's been branded that it's only about girls' education in Afghanistan. And there's so many different layers, but that's how the US branded and sold the conflict to us. But if I said to them, underwrite a series of Starlinks that just sit over, pick a spot, they would be like, tell me more. They know Coursera. They don't even need to know Lika. I can just say, there's Lika, and she's going to talk to them about their menstrual cycles, democracy, and biology. They'd be like, great, let's do it. And there's also a part of me that's like, I could do this in Burundi too. So it feels like I'm jumping into the intellectualized, what's the solution ideas. But what are the other systems that I have total blind spots to in Burundi when it comes to women's health? That I should know about, that we should all know about? That's something to take into consideration. How would you dismantle them? What would you put in its place?
Yeah, so I think for me, I was born and raised in Burundi, but I feel like we have a community that raised us to accept inequalities as something that is very, very like normal, like a normal things. So that's why, like, when Christine was sharing about like what is happening worldwide with young people, it's something really like I know like most young people, they are learning about that like worldwide. So we have really normalized like, being silent. We have normalized becoming silent, not only as women, not as young girls, but also as young people, right? This is why when there are like big meetings out there talking about women and women not being there, we see it as normal, because this is the normal things we have ever learned, we have ever been taught in our communities. So I think this is the kind of system that we need to demolish, a system that put you in a box of silence and then you feel comfortable in it.
Right.
So I know we have young people, we have women who are trying to be out of the box and also dragging other women and other young people out of the box. But I think this is the system we really do need to demolish, the system that teach you that inequalities is something normal, teaching you that those positions are not made for women, teaching you that it's not possible for a woman to hold a PhD, teaching you that there are some possibilities, like when you have a baby, you can't go back to school. When you're still pregnant as a young girl in school, you don't have like the right to go back to school. So we need to demolish all those things. So one of the things I always say is the people who are oppressed, they are the people who hold the solutions we need. And then if we don't give them the space to speak, if we don't take them, train them how to speak, how to share those solutions, it will be impossible for any nation to take out that system. Because if I'm silenced, and I'm the one who holds the solution, we never be where we want to be. So I have a feeling that we need to look into those geographic, culture, tradition things that have been holding women, young people, and young girls back, so that we can be able to reach where we want to be. I'm a believer that any community can change, but it requires a lot. And most importantly, it requires to work a lot with people that hold the solution. Yeah, I always say I'm so interested in learning, striving solution for vulnerable communities, because I believe there is always a way if we listen, if we invest in them, and if we give them the opportunity to thrive.
We say in the States, those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. It strikes me that's a very human-centered truth. But let me ask you a question piece, and then Isaiah, we will come to you. But how might we do that? So if oftentimes, I'll give an example on maternal health here in the United States. Black women suffer at a much higher rate of maternal health problems because of medical bias, because of access to medical care. And there's been a really big movement to both train doctors to listen to patients during labor. We'll just keep it super simple. During labor, if they say they're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable. and being so focused on the patient versus being focused on the medical practice itself. And that's been like a narrative shift, but we've been able to scale it from like a movement content creation bit, right? There's only so many maternal wards in the United States. They all have an email, they all have an Instagram account. You can send the same video to them over and over again. You can get it out there. And there's been a shift. There's been interest. The conversation is actively happening in the places that it should. Is it solving the problem? No, but we are in like the first quarter of it. How would we possibly get to the communities in Burundi, for example, on gender, who are facing some of the biggest gender divides or the biggest medical divides? Is that very tangibly people going there physically? Is there virtual scenarios to it? I'm eager to hear from them, but I sit in this very specific city in this time zone. How do we actually get to their voices and lift it up?
That's a very nice question. I'm actually doing my PhD on that. So
great. Perfect. So you'll have all the answers soon.
I hope I will have like a very good response after when I conclude my PhD. But what I think is that, especially like in Burundi, we are trying to create like community networks where we can, where we have spaces to listen to people. And again, I think like I was also having this discussion with a friend yesterday, how like some countries take advantage of people not being educated to oppress them again, especially when we talk about health system. You know, like when you say I'm doing my PhD here in Germany, like if someone is sick, he have like the right to the information, and this is like a worldwide right for a patient when he come for like health, when he seek health care in any hospital. You have to explain things. And then one of the things that pushed me to work on this PhD is because we have like a high rate of maternal and child mortality in my country. And then, you know, when someone died, they don't even question most of the time. They don't question when this person, why did he die? What happened? Is the healthcare system have something to do with it? So something I think is like, people need to be informed. This is one. And then we need to create spaces so that people can be informed. So we currently now have some community networks where like some communities leaders, they get together with the community. And then we have also people we call health community workers. Those are people who are not like too much educated, but they are there at least to play the role of a junction between hospitals and the community. So they are there to explain to the community in the language they understand what is happening, like when it comes to their healthcare, what they should do. For example, if there is a vaccination running, they have to go from maybe one door to a door to like one door after a door to explain that. And sometimes also they have like community gatherings. So one of the way to address this is to create like networks in the community, and also create ways to bring the message to them, because some of them, they don't know how to read. Maybe they need some information through the radio stations. Some of them, they don't speak French, and some of the words they're in French, so they need to translate some of the information in the local languages. So this is a way forward. I believe I know Burundi is already working on that. It's not like very established all over, but it's there already, and it have been helping at least for people to get information about the questions they have.
It sounds like you have your work cut out for you, but also I am so hopeful because the community networks that you're building. I mean, one of the things that has been a running theme through all of these conversations, and that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, is like, what does decentralized power and decentralized community building actually look like when we have water systems that feel like someone at the top really has to be paying attention to it, but also like, what does it mean at lower levels, and this desire for people to come back to each other, and back to each other and rely on their communities, which I think my hunch is that places like Burundi are still so community centric, even if the information isn't trickling down into the place compared to the United States. And Isaiah, this is where I'm going to turn to you. one of the challenges that we have in the United States is that everyone's been chasing over my parents' generation, my grandparents' generation, been chasing this like American myth that like you get your own house, you get your own white picket fence, you get your own driveway, you get your own car. And then suddenly we are now at a moment where no one talks to their neighbors. Sincerely, nobody talks to their neighbors unless there is a natural disaster. And then people are like, digging each other out of their houses. But there's no community really anymore. And I'm heart sick by it because I love being with people. But I live in a part of the country, while I'm in New York City now, I live in a part of the country that's very politically divided. And I am, for simplicity's sake, I'm on the left. All of my neighbors are on the right. You can interpret that however you'd like, but I'm confident you're all tracking. And I go on right-leaning television shows and I talk about whatever my perspective is on the thing. And my neighbor will like gently come over and bring in the trash or like, pick up the newspaper and knock on the door and say like, do you really believe what you just said on television? And, who's paying you? And like doing it in a very gentle way. But there's no desire really for him. If I say, why don't you come over for Friday night? Why don't we sit down and actually talk about abortion? Like, let's talk about abortion. There's no appetite for that. But my hunch is in places in Burundi, because there's a woven community that still exists and you're not so siloed, the decentralization of power and community building is going to flourish there before it flourishes in the United States. And Isaiah, on that note, what are you seeing in Michigan when it comes to community building? Is it even working? And I will say, if none of you are following Michigan politics, like it's an epicenter and it's radical and it's wild there. So as a Palestinian in Michigan, who has, I'm confident, one eye on the other side of the Atlantic and also trying to organize in Michigan, what are you finding?
I have found that automobile supremacy is a big problem, and that doesn't sound like it has any correlation whatsoever.
I'm sorry,
But
say that one more
when you
time.
have to get in
That is the
automobile
first
supremacy.
time I have ever heard that.
I
You
may have
did.
just coined it.
You
We'll
did.
You
never
might
know.
want to give some context to it for those who may not know the history of that.
Yes. So in Europe, you can walk everywhere. You can go to a coffee shop. You can sit down and have conversations with random people. In anywhere in the East or in the global South. And what I've found where I'm from specifically in a very rural area is if you want to go anywhere, it would be a Walmart, and you're getting in your car to drive 30 minutes to go to Walmart. And that is like the activity of the day. And when we don't have connection with other people because you are spending so much time in transit in a car and not walking and being around other humans, it's very easy to become isolated. Another thing that I found is like this hustle culture that we have in the West. My mother said the other day that 90% of the people in the United States that work hard make it. And I almost lost it when she said that, because we get in these feedback loops where we're constantly working and chasing the next thing, whether it's money or power or control. And that's almost what our central nervous system like becomes adapted to. And Saji and I were talking yesterday about how freedom isn't something that's given to you, it's something that's embodied and comes from within. And when you're constantly under stress or worrying about the next thing, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need food, water, and shelter to be able to reach a level of self-actualization where you can really sit with yourself and look within. And in the West, we don't see any importance on that whatsoever. We look at something like meditation as a waste of time, because why would you do that when you could be working? There's job openings at Costco. And so then when you do those things, it's almost as if you have to posture. Like you said when we started, that conversations can become very performative. And I think, especially in the West, we have gotten wrapped up into this big performance of like what society needs to be, what the American dream needs to be, what hard work truly is. And in reality, it's all just one big performance. It's all one big illusion.
I would also like to offer that I don't think many people are happy.
I do not either. And I think that
Christine.
there is a lot of
Christine's trying not
agitation
to
on
laugh.
the right, specifically. Where I'm from, it is a very radical area, leaning to the right or on the right completely. And what I have found is these people are open to ideas of dignity, ideas of owning the means of production, owning their work, not working for a wage, but working for their life, to bear fruit for other people. And too often, like the unhappiness that they have is taken advantage of by
Yeah.
people in power to then try to keep the people in power. And they posture like, we are trying to help you. We're trying to share power. We're going to give you a great life if you just give us all the control. And that never works, ever.
God, I never thought about that idea of people taking advantage of your unhappiness. I have spent a lot of time thinking about self-worth and how the American dream has like put that doesn't, it's not included in it. My big fear too is that like the American dream, and I saw this a little bit with like in like the MENA region, particularly in like the UAE and Qatar and Bahrain, like the American dream got real exported real quick of like the consumption and like all the handbags and, you know, just like a lot of stuff that does not lead to any happiness or self-worth. And I learned yesterday, and Saji, I don't know if you can speak to it at all, but I think it's worth sharing the inner development goals that obviously the Nordic countries came up with, which are alongside the SDGs, which is, don't get me started on those. But the inner development goals, that if you have no sense of self-worth, if you can't find your own constructive criticism, identify where it is that you're curious, what lights you up, that you'll continue to be on this like rat race. And I do think this is the danger that we're facing in the US, is that no one's happy and they're blaming each other. I'm totally responsible for it. You know, like my kids are like, "Oh, Mom, are you unhappy today because Trump is president?" And I'm like, "Well, that's certainly one of the reasons. And because the dishwasher isn't loaded." You know, like it's like all of the things. But it is, I think this is an opportunity where the global north can look to the global south and look to the joy that is still preserved in these communities, because I certainly saw that when I'm in rural parts of India. Like, I'm just like, God, you guys are so damn happy. And there's no Apple Watch to be seen for miles.
And I think what that comes from is, I was also telling Saji yesterday, there's like two schools of thought. You have people that care about dignity, and that is what they want to radiate. And then you have people that care about capital preservation and making the new hottest product to raise as much money from the funders that they can. And what happens when they end up doing that is the product is not as strong as it could be. The people that it's meant to serve are not served. And you end up chasing capital. And when you chase capital, like I know the US dollar, there's an infinite supply of the US dollar. So you can chase the US dollar forever. It is a hamster wheel. You will never get to the end of the capital game. But when it comes to dignity or love or compassion, those are things that you can carry with you at all times. And Saji and I were also talking yesterday about how those things are eternal. Capital's not eternal. That's something that the second you die, your money no longer matters, so to speak. But when you embody dignity and compassion, the people that you touch in your life, the people that you impact, then go impact other people. And it is like throwing a boulder in a little pond, and the ripples will stay, even if you can't really see them. And the ripples aren't necessarily yours. You don't own those ripples, but without you taking the action to create them, they would have never been able to ripple in the first place and create waves.
Saji, you're a boulder in this conversation, FYI.
This is very true. Very true.
I don't need to be the only one asking questions here. If anyone has questions for each other, and again, the objective of this is like, what are the craziest ideas you all have? And do we need to get Starlinks over Kabul? And what do we need to do to build community networks in rural Burundi? And then show in rural Burundi how they are joy filled and they know they are enough to people in Michigan. This all feels very obvious to me. But I would love to, if you have any other questions, or Saji, if you want to point to anything, I will ask a sort of a final question from me as I let you all jump in. But Peace, Christine, and Lika, can you tell me a little bit in your work how you lift up concepts of enoughness and self-worth? And because what's going to happen ultimately with the kids from Nepal is they're going to be like, what's the next mountain to climb? And having been on the front lines of this thing, sometimes they can get a lot of egos, a lot of, let's go do this next thing. I mean, it's still going to be hard for Nepal. This is a long haul. But like, to Isaiah's point, like, I'm still a recovering hustle culture, and that's totally bullshit. Like, I still hustle all the time, and I don't think what I'm doing is ever enough, ever. And so, when it comes to like gender disparity in Burundi and healthcare and like dignity, and Christine, what you're experiencing in Nairobi, and Lika, like, how are you communicating to women who might be told they might not be enough that they are enough? And with that, I'll shut up.
Please don't shut up. We need you.
Just to chime in and to piggyback on what Isaiah was saying, I'm just thinking of the concept of knowledge, especially for us in Global South, has always been developed from the Global North. And so most of the time it's the Global North setting the pace, and then we in the Global South almost copy pasting the exact same thing, be it in programming, be it in governance, be it in foreign policy, be it in education, you name it. And so to hear Isaiah saying from the Global North that is something that is not working, but then a lot of us in the Global South almost wanting to copy paste that, and that seemingly being the truth, it baffles me. And so to go back to the question of the next high, in Nairobi, just last year, we were on the streets, and the Gen Zs were all in arms and criticizing a lot of the things that we were not happy with. But then you realize from there, we want to go to the Ubers. If you don't have an iPhone, then you're not seen as part of the movement because you're lacking in the materialistic nature of how we want to compartmentalize the movements, right? It's now an issue of how you addressed, what kind of technology you had. Was it an iPhone? Was it a Samsung? What kind of car did you come to the protest with? What kind of social media influencing do you have? How many numbers do you have so that when we take that video, it's going to go viral in no time? And so you realize, again, when it comes to the knowledge production, we're moving away from that community where our humanness was informed by the communities that we came from. Your sense of belonging, your sense of livelihood, your sense of humanness was informed by the community that you're part of. And it's so unfortunate that now, as a young person, should I get pregnant today, I'd have to pay for a nanny to come and help me take care of my kid. While initially, I'd have neighbors literally come and take care of me and my babies.
Who have done it before, so that you didn't have to be a stressed out mom who are like, no, this is just move the baby this way, so that they latch better.
And even pay for it. Like, why would you pay for that service? It still baffles me that we're moving away from our community, and we are capitalizing community now because you'd have to pay for our service. And it's unfortunate that we are seeing a lot of the Africans who are moving to the Global North, who are taking up jobs in the Global North, struggling because affording a nanny is just so expensive. Having a babysitter is just so expensive. While those are things that comes with community. And so we need to be very careful, even when we start thinking of what to borrow from other cultures and what to retain as our initial cultures. And with the contemporary conversations, I believe we need to ensure that we're not losing our humanity to the capitalists. Because, hey, if it's not Instagrammable, then it's not cool. But I thought we were woke. What is this wokeness about if we're not taking care of our own sanity as human beings, as people, as communities? And so I believe it's a paradigm shift, not just in what we consume digitally, but also remembering that we have ourselves to take care of. And if we lose ourselves and our sanity in Instagrammable pictures or the holidays that we're going to, then we're losing ourselves as a people. We're losing our systems, and we are only piggybacking on systems that do not work for us. We are piggybacking on systems that are working against us, but subconsciously we are not aware of the harm that is causing us. And that's something that we need to be very cautious of.
I mean, the stories of activists here in the States who have been lured away from their North Star because of the lists, the blue check marks, the followers. Now, it's a double-edged sword. We need to get the word out to show up at this square at this time, and this is the soundbite. And it's very performative. I'm very afraid of that. I'm very afraid of exporting that because the performative part of it is the thing that's jeopardizing my self-worth. And if I'm stressing about whether or not I'm good enough, I'm certainly not thinking about infant mortality rates.
Mhm.
Does anyone have any questions for each other? If not, I would love to know, Lika, specifically, are you doing any of that sort of dignity building kind of content in the classes for women in Afghanistan, or are you focused on marine biology?
First of all, sorry for the interruption.
It's totally fine. It's fine.
I talk about tech and online education, and then my own internet gets interrupted, which is really funny. But, well, we need to deal with all of that. So yes and no. For now, because we work in a humanitarian crisis zone, and it's a very specific context that we're trying to tackle, most of the emphasis is on academic education to ensure that these women can reintegrate into the society and continue pursuing their passion. Like, I don't know, it's can you imagine to be a woman, be enrolled in a university, have dreams and hopes and goals, and all of a sudden you're just banned from all of that, and you just can't continue. Like for me as a European woman in this part of the world, and I studied in the UK and in the US and traveled all over the world, and I'm this very free-spirited person who loves people and loves exploring. It's the biggest kind of torture to imagine something like that happening to women in another part of the world, which is one of the reasons why I feel so deeply about tackling this issue. So right now we're focused on academic courses and access to actual academic education, but a part of our conversations are always inspirational and just general check-ins about how has your day been, what are you feeling, what are you thinking, what kind of psychological support can we offer you, and that will always be a big part of this work, because we have to do that. This issue is twofold. There is a psychological aspect to it, to be a woman and be this oppressed under the regime, but also there is another aspect to it where you do want to continue your education, you do want to have a job, you do want to have dignity and live in dignity. What do you do when you live under the regime that doesn't give you those basic freedoms? So it's a very difficult context. I believe it's one of the biggest humanitarian crises on our planet currently, and my heart breaks that we don't talk about it enough. And to answer your initial question about crazy ideas or about any ideas on
Please.
how we can improve, what can we do? One idea that I have, and we tried this, we succeeded to some extent, but not fully. So I don't consider this as a failure, but I do want to give this example to answer your question. So what I believe in and what I see as a solution is more young voices and more young people at the United Nations. Now the United Nations has a program for UN youth delegates, which is incredible. And I met some of the most amazing, like-minded activists at the United Nations. The reason that we started a program in Afghanistan is because we met at the United Nations, myself and my fellow Afghan friends. We're currently also considering to launch a similar program in Sri Lanka. And Saji, by the way, I visited Sri Lanka last 2 months ago, and it's amazing. And I loved it. I fell in love with it. And I met with fellow youth delegates from Sri Lanka, and we shared ideas about how we can replicate the program in Afghanistan and also launch it in Sri Lanka. So like having these forums, having platforms like this one to bring people together, to talk to each other, but also to talk to global leaders and have a seat at the table. I mean, right now at the UNGA, like we need more young people. Trump is great, but like we need more young people. We need our ideas. We need to be given a seat at the table. And the example I wanted to bring you and a success story / failure story is we tried to launch a network of former and current youth delegates to the United Nations. This is an effort that we started 3 years ago and unfortunately didn't have the support from the United Nations that it could have and should have had. But the idea was to bring all the UN youth delegates together. All of the previous ones, everyone who served as a youth delegate of their country and all the current ones, and have a network where we meet, where we exchange ideas, where we try to tackle global issues, where we advocate for issues in our countries and around the world to the UN leaders, and have a seat at the table with the UN officials to advocate for issues that are important in our countries. We did that for the education crisis in Afghanistan back in 2022 through this network, and I really believe that such platforms should be institutionalized at the United Nations. United Nations has to be reformed and changed, period. And that would be a very interesting conversation actually to have with fellow activists about what the UN can look like, what the new UN in the digital era, UN in the era of AI, what can it look like? That would be a very interesting conversation to have. But the only kind of international organization that I think will be able to tackle issues globally and be effective is the one where young people are heard and included, because we have innovation, we have ideas, we know more than they think we do. So I hope that that's the kind of UN we can create together moving forward.
Lika, I know Saji has some quick thoughts on this, but I wanted to say, as a former UN employee, I was at the UN for 5 years. So I bleed blue. I stand by the charter, the convention, the declarations, all of the things. But I want to put out there that we are going to start having a series of conversations here about a new UN or what a parallel agency or organization would be. I'm so committed to the work of the UN, and I also think it's expired. And so when I think of all of these youth, like, why the hell do they need the UN? You know, I understand the role, like Christine and I are like, but like, I get the theater of it. I understand its importance, and I think it's worth a very significant debate, but there's not enough proper debate about it. And I want to bring that debate here we're going to, that will be like another track. So what's come out of some of these conversations is last one that we housed that we held on Monday. Some of the participants were thinking about different ways that aid could look now that USAID is gone. Are there different ways that we can think about getting aid to folks? Because as Lika, you know better than anybody, like actually some of the women in Afghanistan just need more entrepreneurial techniques that we can scale here. Or could you do some training, midwifery training, at least like the basics on here? That doesn't require US aid. All it requires is just like a time and a URL and I know stable enough internet. But can we totally rethink aid? Another conversation that's coming out of here is why we should care. So oftentimes, and Isaiah knows this better than anyone, there are people who are interested in dignity, but they're also like, but why should we care what's happening in Ukraine? Like they don't really make the connection between like the Nord Stream and Ukraine being blown up and their prices in rural, their gas prices in rural Michigan. But I think something else that I am so committed to is like, what is the new global institution that we can build that will last 100 years only, right? Like the structure of the UN, is that something that still makes sense? And when I hear your frustration of like, we have the brightest minds in the world who are ready to do this, and the UN's not willing to absorb it and make space for it, I'm like, great, let's go build our own sandbox. So if you're open to it, would love to have you participate in those conversations and lead it. I'm just here as a facilitator and someone who's willing to like take dumb risks. But I know people who have much smarter ideas than I do. So that to me would be a natural next step out of this conversation, in addition to some others too.
Absolutely. I would love to. And one other person that I would love to invite to this conversation is a co-founder and the visionary actually behind this network, my colleague from Afghanistan, former youth delegate of Afghanistan to the United Nations, the first one actually, Rams Bakhtiar. He came up with the idea. He's incredible, and he really saw the need to connect young people who served as UN youth delegates. We have hundreds of thousands actually of them through different generations, and they're all very successful. You know, they all do amazing programs in their own countries, or they're working for the government, or they have their own startups or companies. So these are very incredibly smart, bright young people who at some point of their lives represented the entire youth of their country at the United Nations. So these are the kind of people we need to bring together to have a conversation.
Great.
And we advocated for the network on many different levels at the UN. We met with the youth envoy, but I believe that at that time the political will was not there, the time was not
and
right.
it might never
We're
be.
And I think still push for it. But
I think so too. But I think
Absolutely.
something Christine said at the top of the conversation is the thing that like she articulated so perfectly, and it's a little bit haunting, that the security risk of the youth movement is a real risk to the West. Yeah. And that's just something we can navigate in a space like this.
And also, Lika, be very careful not to start an own exclusive youth movement where it's only people with the same ideas talking to each other. You need to move outside the youth representatives at the UN so that we're able to also share some of these experiences that we've had as delegates to those who may not be privileged to even attend these conversations. So even in starting those networks of youth that have that experience, open yourself up to other youth who cannot come close to such conversations. Sorry, I have to leave. The one thing that I wanted to say was, and especially looking back to Africa and Kenya, we also need to start having conversations around data. And now with the use of technology, how are we able to harness the data that we have to influence policy, to influence program, to influence budgeting, to influence decisions? That has been lacking, and it's so unfortunate that Kenya brags to be among the leading countries on AI, but we're still lacking in data. So what exactly are we using this new technology to do if not to support our needs? And so the conversation needs to transcend from just accessibility to what that accessibility then translates to. If the people who can access technology, can access internet, are not able to then translate that into a particular number of youth within a particular region having access to that information, translating to them being more aware, them being more capacity build on whatever issues they have, then we are really missing the point. And this would be my clarion call to the UN, the AU, all these organizations, you name it. Let us start having conversations around data that is really telling stories, true stories of where programs need to shift to. Data that tells stories of what needs to be budgeted for, data that tells stories of what has happened very well and what has not, and then how that tells impact moving forward, as opposed to us having conversation and saying data, 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 but this data is not telling stories that relate to the people who are supposed to be influenced by the provisions of some of these technologies. And so it really needs to transcend our own elitist conversation to more conversations around the people who really need these services, the youth within the rural areas who internet is not a priority to them. A lot of these young people within the rural areas just need a livelihood, the basics, water, education, and just to be healthy. Internet to them comes as a luxury. And so if the data that we're producing is not able to give them the basics, then they're looking at us as the aliens that people talk about, because it really doesn't address their needs, their initial needs. That is just the basics: food, shelter, and water. And so my clarion call will really be, let's ensure that we are pushing governments, we are pushing the grassroots organizations to really come up with data that tells true story of what is happening, because that is missing. And because that is missing, our policies are not really reaching the people they're supposed to speak to and address. The budgets that are happening, even when it comes to financing, even when it comes to the closure of US aid, we still can't tell a story of who actually got impacted by the US aid funding. And now that it has ended, what gap has been placed? Who is going to suffer? Who is going to benefit? Why don't we have data that gets to really address some of these issues? I know one of the key issues people have been saying is, with the closure of US aid, we're going to see a lot of people die, because then they won't be having ARVs being distributed. But then, is ARV the only issue that US aid was addressing? So why are we not having conversations around the other issues that are not given prominence by the programs that have existed and have ended? What new opportunities have been created with the closure of US aid?
Oh, that'd be amazing.
You'd realize that sometimes perhaps US aid was not as effective because it somewhat created a social class,
Yeah.
because you worked for USA, then you became a social class at the expense of the people who really needed the help that came from USAID. So I think this is a moment where we really need to have conversations that are open and genuine, and not capitalistic, and having those very good job titles, traveling the world, creating our own cocoon of elitist youth who get to sit at the UN, who gets to interact with the president. But then when it comes to local conversations where the youth who see us attend this meeting really hope for something bigger, we're not able to create,
Totally.
because it's not there. It's not there. So it also is demoralizing when you have been given platforms and you have interacted with a lot of these global leaders, but that does not translate to something tangible to the youth, to the communities where you come from. And I think a lot of us, especially coming from the international youth engagement, you now start shying away from being seen in the international platforms, because if that does not translate to something back home, then you're seen as a failure, unfortunately.
Mm.
And so how then do we start going into these meetings and come back with tangible things, tangible policies that our governments are able to implement? If they're not tangible policies, let's have tangible programs that we can look back and say, I went for this, and this is what I was able to do when I came back home. Because at the end of the day, charity begins at home. Isaiah, you might be in Michigan today, but people are still waiting for you at home. Your own family is still waiting for you at home. And much as we are pushing this globalization agenda, at the end of the day, we are part of those small families that together create the global platform. We cannot do without each other. It has to be those small groups, the families that we come from, that then contribute to the bigger global agenda. And so it's a two-sided coin, and we need to take care of each of the sides. I thank you.
Christine, thank you so much for taking the time. I have one seed that I want to plant. One of the other things that we're playing with, and when I say we, I mean people way smarter than I, are trying to understand the data by way of the inputs and not the outputs.
Mhm.
We spend a lot of time saying how many girls were educated, but we have a very hard time tracking it back to the dollar and the program and the things that did and didn't work, because our capitalistic structures are entirely based on outputs, on GDP, GNI. Everything only cares about the output, and therefore we have no perspective into the input and the things that work. Some things are going to work and some things are not going to work, and we want to know that data. So one of the ideas is like, are there new indexes that we can explore that will help us understand inputs better? And I also want to say, I love your last words, and I'm also entirely uncomfortable with them, because my relationship with my extended family has gotten incredibly difficult because of politics in the United States over the past 6-8 years. And it's one thing that I've written books on this. I spend my life trying to develop conflict resolution musculature, and I'm still not even able. Sure, my own kids, my own babies, like my charity is there, but like one of the biggest challenges in the US right now is this idea of like pushing loved ones away because you are on his side or on her side or whatever it might be. And it's really bad. And again, I think it's a beautiful moment to be like, what does the global South do here? Because we can't do it up here. Thank you for coming. And on that note, Saji, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jenna. And just in the closing, I mean, there are 4 thoughts that I'm taking away from this. One is the need to understand and shape a sort of norms about the power and the leadership and the potential of young people, but not just as young people, but looking at it intergenerationally, because young people occupy a society and are part of a society. And it cannot be just all about young people. It has to look at it as a societal approach with challenges that we are inheriting or experiencing now. So the norms, what are the norms that need to be thinking now? The second is the institutions. What are the institutions understanding and acting on these norms? Whether it's around climate, whether it's on gender, whether it's on governance, what are the institutions? And the institutions, for me, is also systems. So this is where the vertical power structures and the horizontal powers of young people, network powers come into place really well. But collective level impact that a society can experience. And this touches on Jenna's one of the last points around inputs versus outputs. I'm going to go into impact as well, not just an output, but an impact, and to be able to understand how it is making an impact on people's everyday lives. So how does data, how does AI, how does tools like that help develop a way of understanding inputs of money and outputs of activities, and it's transforming people's lives, and be able to tell a story that is simple, not complex. And to be able to show an accountability in that. I think there's a lot of more promising practices. Kenya is one example of where we are testing these things out. The fourth, I think, is around what does financing going to look like in the coming years? to support generational challenges, but generational problems and solutions to those. So you're not, instead of like tinkering around the edges with grants, we have to imagine new ways to think about financing, right? So the role African private sector plays, small business associations play are pivotal instead of this colonial dependency on outsiders to create solutions for insiders within communities. But I'll leave with one I think that Isaiah also touched on. I think it touched upon everyone, is the idea of the self. And Jenna, you talked about individual development goals. Systems are people are part of systems. And if we don't go, and I'm taking Christine's idea of local or family, it's more about individual self. If we are able to awaken ourselves internally and be able to understand our systems that keep us apart internally, that's to me is a root cause place to start to actually then develop what those systems outside can be, what relationships we have with each other can be, and how do we tackle the people we don't like to, we have lots of disagreements with, stems from our own inherent egos and privileges. So if we are able to start there, then you're influencing many systems itself. So it's a way of rethinking about how we influence and have an impact. And from going back to, let's go back to the basics of who we are as a human race and people we are, and how to start there as opposed to the externally trying to system within the UN or banking systems itself. Banking systems are inherited by people. And that's to me is the starting point. Again, I just want to thank everyone for being part of this conversation. This is just the beginning, not the end of a conversation. There'll be many more to come. And if you have other people you want us to talk to, share those, Lika. I know your colleagues very well. I know the work that you guys are doing. So, we would love to have these first, open conversations to think and unpack these big questions. But, if it's okay, I want to thank everyone for participating in this, and really appreciate your wisdom you shared with us, and bringing your heart into this and speaking openly and not a canned way of speaking. So thank you for all that.
Thank
and I
you,
really want
everybody.
to have a wonderful, wonderful day. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.